Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, how to bibliography, how to read bibliographies, how to make annotated bibliographies. First, what and why bibliographies? The word bibliography is one of those fancy Greek compounds, biblis meaning book and grapho meaning to write. The oldest idea connected to the word bibliography is writing books. But the idea of writing about books follows right along. And that's what we have in contemporary times. Bibliography is both the study of books as physical objects, descriptive or analytical bibliography. And bibliography is lists of sources and how to find them. This is the enumerative bibliography we scholars expect in a research paper. Lists were the first reason to write things down. Literacy itself begins in Mesopotamia with the attempt to record inventory of warehoused stuff. As soon as there were longer texts of philosophy and literature, there was a desire to make, record, and share reading lists. These lists of texts that scholars found significant formed the earliest kinds of bibliographies. They were intended for study, like the Chinese tradition of leishu, lists of canonical books with quotations and summaries of ideas for study. But these ancient book lists, like leishu, were intended to be read for themselves. When Greek scholar Diogenes Laertes in the 3rd century went to write bios for philosophers, he naturally listed what they wrote. His book has come to be called Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers in English. Diogenes Laertes is more telling the history of ancient philosophy than gossiping about the lives of philosophers, and he collects famous quotations, summarizes and lists notable works, and editorializes about the influences of their ideas. In short, he's written a very excellent and very old annotated bibliography, which scholars still use. Annotated bibliographies are enumerative bibliographies. They list and collect sources on a topic or in a field, and they assess the place of the source in history. The word annotation comes from Latin, and it just means with notes. It's got notation right in the word. So while the Wikipedia might tell you that Diogenes Laertius wrote a collection of biographies, I'd suggest he wrote an annotated bibliography. He emphasizes his point of view, which is Greek-centric and dismissive of other cultures. Multiculturalism is not a virtue in the ancient world. He summarizes and judges and assesses the significance of the philosophy, as well as referring to the sources he draws on. He's mostly collecting and repeating without a lot of his own critical thinking, but his opinions are also clear. He loves Epicurus, for example, and throws shade at Aristophanes, the grammarian. Dudes named Aristophanes get so much shade. So this is the quote from Diogenes about Epicurus. He, Epicurus, uses in his works plain language with respect to anything he is speaking of, for which Aristophanes the grammarian blames him on the ground of that style being vulgar. But he was such an admirer of perspicuity that even in his treatise on rhetoric, he aims at and recommends nothing but clearness of expression, and in his letters, instead of the usual civil expressions, greetings and farewell and so on, he substitutes, "May you act well," or "May you live virtuously." This kind of great author, great man list was repopularized and Christianized by Saint Jerome for the European Middle Ages. He's the fellow who translated the Bible into Latin, which made it accessible to literate scholars across Europe. When he wrote his own biography / book list, De Viris Illustribus, on illustrious men, somewhere in the 4th century, Jerome's work inspired a whole genre of on illustrious men that set up reading lists and history for different Catholic orders. St. Jerome had beef with St. Ambrose of Milan, and though he thought Ambrose was too important a figure to omit from his book, he didn't want to compliment him. So Jerome says, "Ambrose, a bishop of Milan, at the present time is still writing. I withhold my judgment of him because he is still alive, fearing either to praise or blame, lest in the one event I should be blamed for adulation, and in the other for speaking the truth." So much shade. Both these men end up sainted for their roles in the early Christian church, but damn, I can't say nothing about him because if I praise him, you'll say I'm sucking up, and if I diss him, I'm not lying. Oh, okay. But also, book lists are supposed to have assessment, evaluation, and judgment. You're sharing what you read and what you thought about it, and why your readers should follow up or not. Annotated bibliographies are supposed to vividly comment on what they list. By the 12th century, we start to get lists of references in scholarly materials. But the father of modern bibliographies is a Swiss scholar named Conrad Gessner, who made the attempt in 1545 to list all the books that had been printed in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, ever. Since the printing press was invented for Europeans around 1436-ish, it wasn't a crazy, impossible idea, though it was a moving target. The Bibliotheca Universalis was nothing but an annotated bibliography, a list of books with a bit of the writer's evaluation of them. While Jerome and Diogenes Laertius include names and titles in an entry that's largely intended to be read, this whole book was intended as a reference to skim rather than as a book to read. It does, however, still include snark about which book sucked, but it's still far more to be used as a reference, something to skim, rather than a text to be read for itself. So this is where biographies come from. Written lists of reading lists passed between scholars with enough information so that the books could be identified. It's a thing that was invented for analog media, a thing that went with card catalogs and paper libraries. Doesn't a list of links do this work for digital people? Is the bibliography an outdated technology? No. Hell no. This is a list of links in place of my bibliography for a sample paper. Yes, this is where the source can be found, and clicking on it is how you find it. But this list puts the burden on me to follow the link, identify the writer, publisher, assess the quality, and so on. It sucks. I can see the hosts of the first couple entries and guess what they're about, but those DOIs at the end, I know that a DOI number is always scholarly, but what is this source about? What if the URL has changed and the source no longer is where or what it was at the other end? What if the word processor just breaks the link? How can I find the source? I can't read the information I need in the link. The bibliography in a research paper is supposed to do the analysis like Jerome and Gessner and Diogenes Laertius did. In code, a bibliography is made to be skimmed down the margin to find a source, but each entry can be read, and in that reading is the basic information about what kind of source is being referenced. Like in a sentence, the order of the information and the punctuation gives the reader clues about where the source can be found, but also how reliable it is, whether it's popular or academic. With a bibliography, enough of that information is right there that a savvy reader doesn't need to look at the source itself. This here is an APA bibliography, and the first two entries are from dictionaries. These are popular crowdsourced websites that I recognize, and they're being cited for definitions for contemporary slang terms. The slang is at least 20 years old now. I can tell that from the dates the entries were created. This next entry says that a person named Duckworth in 2013 did a TED Talk about education, and the video is being cited. Then there are two songs from Kendrick Lamar. The lyrics have been taken from a website, so the music is not being cited so much as the words. Love in 2016 wrote an article about Kendrick Lamar as part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's an article published in an academic journal. I don't have to visit the pages to get any of this information. The italics mark the journal title separately from the title of the article. The DOI confirms that the article is academic, but I'd be guessing it was academic from the pretentiousness of the journal title, Cultural Studies, Critical Mythologies. Ogbar published a book on Black Power in 2004 in a university press, so I know it's academic. If the book is online, I can find it with this information, and if it isn't, I can find it in a library. I have everything I need to know what kind of source it is, how reliable it is, and how to find it. This is the references page that goes with a sample paper I wrote to demonstrate APA style, but let's take a look at an annotated bibliography in MLA for comparison to see the kind of annotated bibliography you might make as an annotated bibliography assignment. This is an annotated bibliography that I made as part of this project. Annotated bibliographies can be either like St. Jerome's, a reading list on a topic intended for others to read, or like mine, which is notes I was taking for myself about this research project on annotated bibliographies. The first entry has an organization as an author, the American Library Association. The title of the thing I'm citing is in quotation marks, and then there's the date and the URL. This is a web page on the American Libraries Association's website. Below the bibliographic citation, I've got an explanation for myself of what I found. The next entry is on bibliography from the Wikipedia, and in my notes, I write down what I found useful and what I used the source for. I'm reminding you that the Wikipedia is a jumping off point rather than a destination for research. I wouldn't accept the answer from the Wikipedia to settle a bet, but I started there and then confirmed everything I found with more reliable sources. The Wikipedia is not a reliable source because it's editable, created by amateurs, and too big to be fact-checked. However, the sources that they use are often excellent, and the summaries make great starting places for research. The Wikipedia led me to the book from Blair, Too Much to Know, and to Robertson's article, A Brief History of Biographies, which is what I was looking for all along, and couldn't find because try finding information about the history of bibliographies, and the first thing that you find is bibliographies about history. So that's annotated bibliographies and the beginnings of reading bibliographies. The point is that with or without annotation, a correctly formatted bibliography delivers enough information to make good judgments about it, as well as giving information about where the source is to be found. Annotations just mean even more personal commentary and thinking from the writer of the annotated bibliography. The whole history of reading lists is about communicating this kind of information, one scholar to the next. And this is why formatting your bibliography matters, even though it's a giant pain. Thank you. Go do your annotated bibliography assignment.